Welcome to Minerva, a monthly show where we discuss the mysteries. We hope to give you enough information that you can go away and do your own study. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Duncan.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about Nazi Occult Societies.
Yeah.
Now, this is a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah.
We know from history that the Nazis were into the occult in many different ways. And we know actually now that many far-right groups are still into the occult, and sort of neo-Nazis are still practicing occult rituals, etc. But I think the best place to start with this is a society that popped up in the sort of 1920s, 1918 type of time, called the Thule Society. Now, this was a who's list of Nazi sympathisers at the time. What do you think was the purpose of the Thule Society, or the reason they started this type of group?
I think even before we get to that stage, I think the thing I find astounding is for so long I didn't... Whenever we hear about the Nazi and an occult belief, to be honest, I honestly thought it was propaganda, from the sense of like Indiana Jones.
Right,
You know,
okay.
We hear so much from a cinematic perspective. Oh, Hitler was interested in these things. And it's so across that culture. To be honest, I didn't give it much credibility. It's just a case of... But the more you look into it, it is... And there's so much scary about the whole Nazi regime, which we're going to have to get into at some point. But to see this occult begin to it, yes, you're quite right. It seems to be a founding thing to the whole point. But going on to your question about the Thule Society, I think it's one of those things where you have to look at that moment in time. We're looking straight after the First World War. Germany was in such a state of oppression. The sanctions against it, there's a political argument one way or the other. But I think the morale for even German culture was so low.
Right.
And so when you look at the Thule Society turning around and saying, do you know what, we come from a proud race. We go back to history so far, where we go to the first arguments of the Reich systems of when Germany was at its height, when it was a leading point. I think there was a need for German culture to go, do you know what? We got beaten, but we're a proud people. We have this. And so I think that's where it would have got its need from, or at least its generative power to exist.
Yeah, and one of the things that absolutely astonishes me about this is that we know through, again, historical writings that members of the Nazi Party were involved in searching for some mythical things. The Hammer of Thor, the Spear of Destiny, which was supposed to have pierced, Jesus's ribs, and the Holy Grail. We know the Otto Rahn story, which is something we can probably talk about another time. But they were out there physically looking for these types of things. And, were the Thule Society involved in this? Were they the people with the power behind it?
I think, if not necessarily the power behind it, I think it's highly possible that they could be. But the ideology that they set definitely seems to be the source for it.
Yeah.
And I think it could have got a wide audience, not simply because people believe necessarily within the magical power that it might have had, but just the belief there was. Like, for instance, if you have, I think the Spear of Destiny was in Austria, wasn't it, where they managed to take it and Hitler then took it. Whether you believe it had a magical power or not, it doesn't matter. If you take away from a culture where they think it does, you've taken that power.
Yeah.
And that, as a propaganda tool on so many levels, was exactly what the Nazi regime worked on, this concept of propaganda. So the belief in wasn't really necessary.
No, and I think it's really interesting that if we, again, going back to what you're saying about their need for certain things in the society at the time, if we look at Germany, it had so many secret societies around that time. Lots linked to, the early beginnings of Freemasonry and other societies, which we're very well versed with, but also the Illuminati.
Yep.
Would have had a small but a tangible influence on these types of societies that are cropping up, that are felt to be occult in some ways. They're doing ritual. There's a number of people that would have been involved in this that it builds an ideology, and secret societies is a place that, we can hide things. And this is where we move on to the idea of another society which crops up called the Vril Society.
Yeah.
Now, started on the German-Austrian border in a mountain lodge, one evening. This was a group of people who were, again, the inner circle of the Thule Society. And what sort of makes me tinge and gives me the creeps a little bit about this is that, this is in exactly the same area that they had the Eagle's Nest, where Hitler had a holiday home. It was right on top of that, and it feels just so close to what he was talking about. It was founded by a guy called Rudolf von Sabordendorf. I think I've pronounced that correctly. He was, a well-known and very open sort of occultist, a member of the Thule Society, also a Freemason, and an alchemist. Now, it all feels very dark, and when we talk about these sort of things, so was the Vril Society just a dining club?
Like so many Masonic lodges?
Yeah.
I suppose to the premier part, the Thule Society, I can imagine to a degree, yes. It's a bigger organisation. It's drawing in people with similar interests in occultism, in this Aryan-like philosophy. But I think with this next one that comes along, is this now distilling down to the point of, if you're really interested in this thing, you come into this one.
Yeah, the Vril Society was definitely like an inner circle.
Exactly. But it seems something almost like that concept of self-promotion. So who was the guy who originated it?
So it was Rudolf von Sabordendorf, but he also had another friend called Derek Eggart.
Oh, right, yeah. But both together, there's an ego we first see we come through. I mean, the first guy actually gave himself a noble title.
He did, yes.
He didn't get it from anywhere, he just made it up. So
yeah.
we see that he wants to be a figurehead. He wants to be seen as something important. But the other guy ended up being the mentor for Hitler himself.
Yes, he was.
Which is, we now see a very distinct pattern in the sense of this egotistical structure going on. Mm. Now, if I remember right, I think it's even before America actually started coming into the Second World War. They actually they set out to do a psychological test on Hitler in the sense of who's this person we're going up against. And they went into his family history where I think it was the youngest out of all his brothers and sisters. All of them died. He was the last one.
Wow.
And his mother was apparently doted on. They even say, no, you're important, you're the special one, you're the ones. So you've got a child being given this concept of, no, I am important. Yeah, I survived, but the others didn't. You then have this mentor come along saying the same thing, but now he's taken it to the next stage, but you've got this Aryan race. You are this chosen person. Yeah. It starts getting incredibly scary where you see these infant steps of what you know from history is coming next. It's, no longer a dining club.
No, it's clearly not. And actually it was a club that involved a mixture of men and women.
Yeah.
There were mediums involved in this, female mediums, and we do know that later on we start to see other things within the rituals, which we'll get onto. But this was top Nazi leaders. This was a small group of the real powerful people. And what almost makes it scarier is the reason it's called the Vril Society. Because Vril comes from a book, The Coming Race, and it's about an underground race of people. When I say underground, I mean really underground in the centre of the earth, who have this this sort of, it's almost sort of attributed to a liquid called Vril. It's an energy. It's like the Chinese maybe would call it qi.
Yeah.
And it's this powerful energy that can do good, but it can also do bad. And the idea of Vril is just almost too much for them to turn down.
It is, but the scary thing is, when I started reading about this, I remember, again, we've got to go back to that period of time. The sense of, my father was in the RAF in the Second World War.
Right.
He actually flew mosquitoes until they found out he was colourblind, so he got grounded. But he's from this time.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with him about UFOs, just as you do. And he was saying, obviously from an RAF thing, he believes in UFOs because it's literally unidentified flying object.
Yeah.
So there's something up there, I don't know what it is, it's unidentified. But then, of course, we go further. He said he didn't believe in alien space travel at all. Because he was, again, we're looking back at a time where technology was, like, it's impossible to make that distance. We're not looking at things like light speed or trans-warp travel, things like that. So he couldn't believe that at all. But he did believe, he said, if there was something, he would believe that actually comes from inside the Earth.
Okay.
And so you've got an Englishman, definitely not a Nazi, but he was this idea that something could live under the ground, he could accept.
Right.
So looking at a group of, and now for us, it's that is so surreal. People living under the Earth, ridiculous. But if I can see it, my father thinking it, I can understand a generation over in Germany going, yeah, this is plausible. But again, we have to take it is openly from a science fiction book, known to be. But we can look at our modern culture where we've got things like Scientology.
Yes.
Written by, or let's say, the founding father of it was a science fiction writer.
Yes.
And if you go through it reads very much like a science fiction like ideal. But even if we just took Star Wars we know unquestionably is science fiction.
Yes.
And yet we have people who would happily write on a documented form, what is your religion? Jedi.
Right.
And they do actually live, and they believe they live like that. They know they're not going to do all the Force thing, but they believe in it. And so, again, there is a plausibility that although these people ended up being crazy anyway, the mind that has this for the Nazi sort of like party.
Yes.
But there is a level of rationale, even though it's come from a fiction writing, where they go, do you know what? That can actually make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that really scares me with this is that this wasn't a light political party.
No.
You know, the Thule Society was even sort of deeper. And then you've got the Vril Society, which just becomes dark.
Yeah.
You know, there is talk that they believe that sacrificing human beings would gain more Vril. It's that ancient old, you know, religious thing of if we sacrifice the most important thing to us, the gods will shine on us even greater. And they believe that in children as well, that, you know, children would be the best source of Vril, which is incredibly worrying. You know, these are people who then go on to do the things that we know they went on to do, which is scary in itself. But, you know, did they take this into their politics?
I think unquestionably take it into their politics. And I think that's, when we say we look back at history, we have to, the sense of, to learn the lessons that we need to learn. You know, history is so important. And I think this is one of those things where we have a risk of glossing over, because again, we're talking about occultism. And I've, like I said at the beginning, I've brushed over it because, who's interested in artifacts? I'm in a position of power. I'll get whatever nice artifacts. It's a collection of art.
Yeah.
Not seeing it as actually, no, there is a danger if we do not check these parts, because I foolishly, with the anti-Semitism that happened, out of all the atrocities that happened, the anti-Semitism, I can't even say it.
Yeah.
Happened, I thought, was when they start taking over power in Germany, like where you got the Night of a Thousand Knives, etc.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's in the very earliest writings of both societies, where pamphlets are being issued by these people with this anti-Semitism in. I've got to manage to say it then. but it's there. And so you see this structure of both propaganda and ideals coming from such an early period and from occult writings.
Yeah, the whole thing's incredibly scary in many ways. But we talk here on Minerva about mysteries, and the mystery element in this is just whether or not this really happened, because it's so hard to believe. It feels so, you know, so alien that this existed, but it did. And we see even more evidence when we look at Wewelsburg Castle, the castle of Himmler, who bought this castle, took over this castle, and there are a couple of chambers within one of the wings there which look incredibly ready for ritual. Yeah. You know, there are rumours that the Black Mass was done there. There are rumours that there was animal magnetism projects going on there where he'd freeze people and, you know, and put warm prostitutes on them to try and thaw them out. Some crazy, crazy things. Yeah. And, you know, was this happening? Is it, you know, were they really doing this?
Well, again, we don't actually know specifically what happens. We have rumors and stuff, and its trouble is it's not difficult to believe those rumors because of the atrocities that we do know. Even
of
from
course,
scientific experiments, we
Yeah.
know they did on prisoners and people in the Holocaust. But there is that part where, let's take Himmler as an example. Did he? It seems very clear. I mean, if you look at the rooms, we know that although the castle is older, the rooms were. The architecture is newer. It is the 1940s, 1930s, 1940s sort of like design. It's laid up in such a James Bond film set like thing. It's hard not to accept that this is a room for some kind of ceremony.
But it's certainly on the floor. There's the black sundial, and
you've got the black sundial. I think that's in the higher room, isn't it? And the lower one, you've got a pit where people say either Himmler was standing there because it's a great oratory-like space, or is where an eternal flame was meant to go, and that's underneath it all. But you've got pedestals on the side. But it's this case of, did Himmler genuinely believe in this occult value and power, and so therefore created this as being the thing? Was he just egotistical? In the sense of, it doesn't matter if it works or not, just the fear of it working. Like in the same way as, in fraternities in colleges in America, where when you join, you get hit by a paddle. And so that demeaning act gives power to the person holding the paddle, but that is transferred, of course, when that person moves up the rank and he's paddling the next one. So you have that concept of dominance through this level of oppression. Or was he really just a megalomaniac in the sense of, I'm going to create this because I'm going to make myself a god. I have this power and position, whether it's believed or not, it doesn't matter. I am God, as it were. So I'm going to create this around me. But it doesn't really matter which one is real, because all of them goes down this incredibly dark path of whether you're using it as propaganda or really believe in this black magic-like works.
Yeah, and I mean, continuing that to modern day, we know that there are neo-Nazi groups. We know that they're very small, but there is an awareness of them. There's also a group that we were talking about earlier, the Order of the Nine Angles and Atomwaffen and things like that, who are seeming to still mix, if they do exist in that sense, Nazi philosophy with the occult. And it's very much the power and the ego and all of that. And it's the blend of the left-hand path, which is the path that they're going down, which is very much the black magic thing. And we have the right-hand path, which will be more ceremonial things and rituals that maybe groups like Freemasonry or other groups will be using.
But as I say, for Freemasonry, it is a focusing on the candidate to look inside themselves for the betterment, not just for themselves, but for their belief in God and for the society. But it's done from the sense of, if you're a good person within yourself, you should emanate that good.
Definitely.
There. And so that's where we say about, you could say that's good magic, whether you see it's one way. But when you go on the other side and say, look, you do this because you as an individual will gain power, even though that power you feel will help somebody from the minority, it's through dominance that you're doing it.
It is.
And it's that scary thing, especially when people start mixing those two things up, when they start putting Freemasonry, because you do rituals, because you do it behind door, you're in this path. No, it couldn't be any further apart.
No, and I think for us this has been a slightly different type of episode because, again, as I said earlier, we go into mysteries normally and there's not anything for us to necessarily crack here. But I think it's so important that we talk about these things and actually look back at history and look at some of these orders and know what they're doing so that we can hopefully have a brighter future as well. And we'd be so interested to hear in the comments of any new research into this and anybody else that knows about these things in more detail. So, we're constantly learning about this stuff. And it's been fascinating for us to talk about it. So please do leave some comments in there and let us know what you think about that. Also, please like and subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you very soon.